Is there a typical day for a 21st century princess? Hardly. Princess Theodora of Greece and Denmark has had some experiences that will surprise you. She'll discuss them next on Global Perspectives.
This is Global Perspectives with Pulitzer Prize-winning commentator John Bercia.
Welcome to Global Perspectives. In the world of royal families, dreams can and do come true. HRH Princess Theodora, through her philanthropy, helps dreams come true for people in all walks of life. Welcome to the show, Princess Theodora.
Thank you for having me.
So you have chosen as your career acting. How did that happen, and how did that work out given your royal connections?
Well, I started in school when I was about 11, and I did a play, and I was painfully shy as a child. And I was given an opportunity to be in this play, and I absolutely adored it. And I was like, I felt like this was something I could do. I suddenly sort of broke out of myself, and I loved the idea of being able to hide behind someone else and become someone else. I didn't have to be myself. And so I just continued with that through my education, all the way through college. And I am so thankful that I've had the support of my family in doing this, because it is a crazy career to choose. And so many people tell me, you should just pick anything else. But I love it so much.
And I would imagine in other royal families, the response might not have been positive to this career choice.
Well, actually, to my face, everybody is very, very encouraging of it, and they're actually very excited for me, and they love to see the things I do. I actually recently got a call from my aunt, Queen Sophia, and saying that she saw me in a film that she didn't realize I was in, and she saw my name in the credits, and she was like, oh my goodness.
But you were born in London, so far away from castles and all of that. Well, what was it like growing up royal, but outside of where your royal roots came from? I
think the upbringing I had was fairly unique in that I think for a lot of it, I had a very normal and grounded upbringing. And we lived a pretty private life. I didn't have the responsibilities that I might have had we still been living in Greece. But there were, of course, occasions where we were sort of more on ceremony for sort of anniversaries or weddings and things like that, and that's when the sort of princess duties would come more into effect, and it wasn't. And for me, those types of events, it's just me and family. It just feels like a family event, a family reunion almost. So it felt fairly normal, and I was at school and treated normally, and I think I'm very lucky to actually have had that experience.
Mm-hmm. So when did you actually visit Greece for the first time?
The first time I went to Greece was when I was 10 years old. And it was an experience I'll never forget. I mean, I was extremely young, but it was such an impressionable trip for me. And first of all, it was a surprise that we were going. I mean, me and my younger brother weren't told until the day before we were going. And I had this idea of Greece in my mind that wasn't what I saw in the end, and it was such a positive experience. It was a very emotional trip home, and especially for my parents, and they hadn't been back in since my father's mother died, and seeing how emotional it was for them, I think, was very impactful for me. And then seeing the house where my parents lived, and my sister, and sort of spent the first few years of her life, and it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary, and it felt, walking around that house, it felt like a time capsule, and I think it's something that stayed with me for a long time, and to see how they lived and what had been and what might be. But I think what I saw the most was how welcoming people were to us there, because we didn't know how the reaction was going to be. And they were so warm and so welcoming, and there was a lot of cheek pinching. Yes. And just finally getting to see the country that I'd heard so much about.
And then after that visit, it was another decade or so before you went back again.
It was exactly a whole 10 years. We were allowed back, and it's so wonderful to now be able to come and go as we please.
For those who may not be fully up to speed with why it was taking so long and you were allowed back, could you explain a little bit about the circumstances?
So it was over a number of years. There was an ongoing court case, and my father was wishing to go in and out of Greece as he pleased, and either have his property back or not. As the case was, the properties now no longer belong to my family, and this was a battle that went. It was a long time, and I think it was best that we didn't go to Greece in that time just to aggravate the situation. But luckily, now they're back home. Now they've been living in Greece for the last couple of years, and they're so happy, and I'm so happy for them. It's been such a long time in coming, and it's all they've wanted, and just to see them settled and enjoying the country.
Tell us about your philanthropy. In Greece, you've got such an old, diverse, exciting array of everything. And it's a country that has had its share of challenges in recent years, from political ones to more recently issues with migration. What is your reading of the situation now?
I think the biggest situation at the moment is the refugee crisis that Greece is sort of at the forefront. There are so many refugees coming into the country, and there's just so little that can be done for them, and Greece doesn't really have the capability to handle that many people. And I think it's sort of ensuring their well-being should be a priority. Sort of an organization that I'm involved with is one that my father started called the Anna Maria Foundation, named for my mother. And we've been raising money for natural disasters in Greece, and a few years ago we donated a couple of ambulances to an area in Greece. And it would be my hope that we could do something with the Anna Maria Foundation and help with the refugees in some way. I think it's difficult for them to make that crossing. In general, just anyway, it's for them to make it to Greece is a feat in itself, and there are so many obstacles that they have to come across to get to that point. Whether it's just sort of finding the money to do so, or weathering the bad weather and the conditions of boats or trafficking that's happening. Once they arrive there, sort of trying to figure out where to go and how they're processed and looked after, and I think that's the key in helping them finding sort of strong footing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, exacerbating all of this is the weak economy, not just in Greece, but in Europe and still around the world to a significant extent. We tend to forget that when we go through these long periods of recession, the effects don't disappear overnight. And they tend to be felt most during the recession and afterward among young people. And young people are disproportionately unemployed all over the world.
Exactly, and it's and the unemployment rate for the youth in Greece is just at an all-time high. And I mean, it's, this is, one of the most educated generations in history, and even after education, they can't find a job, and it's so troubling because people want to leave the country and find something better, but in leaving, that doesn't help the situation either. And I think there needs to be some sort of programs or prospects or something that's appealing for people to stay and continue to invest in their country.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I personally appreciate their frustration to a certain extent. I graduated into a recession, and I very quickly realized that all the credentials in the world weren't going to find you a job if there were no jobs to be had.
Exactly.
And that's one of the fundamental problems. There just aren't enough jobs for everyone who's working his or her way through the university system.
Exactly. I think people need to find something enterprising to do and find, I don't know, within like startups or companies or things that they can that would attract people from outside of the country to invest back into Greece and create that sort of platform.
So when you go back to visit, is it just about family? Do you pretty much stay close to home, or do you like to go out and you're probably still experiencing things that you never got to experience because you were gone for so long?
Absolutely. I mean, for the most part, it is very family-oriented, and because I live so far away in Los Angeles, seeing them is sort of very important to me. But there is a lot of the country that I haven't seen, and there are so many islands, and the parts that I have seen have been through my father, and he's an avid driver, so he loves driving through the countryside and showing us the Greece that he grew up in, because it is such a wonderful place, and it's so beautiful, and the people are passionate and warm, and I hope that is something that people won't forget.
So when you drive around, you must get recognized everywhere you go,
Well,
or not?
I mean, me personally, not as much. They're not. I don't think they're as used to seeing me as I didn't grow up there. But if I'm with sort of my older brothers or something like that, then very much so. And my father loves to walk around by himself with my mother, just take a walk, and people will come up to him and shake his hand, and in typical Greek fashion, a lot of them will come up and said, "I voted against you, but it's a pleasure to meet you," and I voted to meet you, which is fine, and it's something he really enjoys doing, and he does it. He walks around Athens a lot too, and talks to people and see how they're feeling, and things like
That was going to be my next question. People who didn't support you, are they going to be troublesome? Are they going to be dangerous? Sounds like not.
No, I don't, and I think it's one of those wonderful things where if you don't support something, it doesn't mean you have to make it into something incredibly negative. And my father's very receptive to that.
Let's talk about your acting career for a bit. Getting into acting is almost as challenging as the young people trying to find jobs these days, and but you prepared for it. You went through a wonderful college program, and when you first arrived in Hollywood, did you know a lot of people? Did you have friends, contacts, or were you really struggling uphill?
Yeah, when I moved, I really didn't know anyone. I knew one person, and she helped me sort of integrate and introduce me to some people. But other than that, I was very much on my own, and I found through her and friends of hers, I found an acting class, which was hugely beneficial, because then I found a sort of focus and routine. And then it's sort of, after that, it's keep networking and contacting and get an agent and auditioning and hustling.
Your princess status, did that help you, or was it not part of the conversation?
It wasn't part of the conversation, and that's one of the reasons why my stage name is Theodora Grease. I wanted somewhat of that anonymity, and I didn't want to walk into a room or a casting and then be like, well, you're only here because you're a princess. The funny thing is that now I realize that is not necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of people use their influences to get in a room, and I think this is something that it's taken a lot of time for me to adjust to. And I'm confident enough in my training and ability that if I'm in a room, I can then deliver. And that's what I'm sort of working on.
So your first big opportunity came with a famous soap opera,
Yes.
The Bold and the Beautiful. Is that something you set out to accomplish, or it happened, or a combination of several different things?
It was sort of a combination of things. I was invited to take a tour of the set, and on my way out, I stopped by the casting director's office and gave her my headshot, and and she said, well, if I think of anything, or well, there's nothing coming up at the moment, I'll keep you in mind. And it was about, I want to say, a good year before I got called back in to do a reading just to see what I could do. And then about 6 months after that, we have a role we'd like you to come in for a day and do. And I was so excited. And then that day has been 4 years. And they told me that the fact that my character had a name was a really good sign, because you can be brought back.
Right.
But it's been such a phenomenal experience and such a great learning experience, learning on the job, so to speak.
So from that initial experience, obviously you weren't content just to do that, so you were probably looking for other opportunities as you went along. Was it easier because you had that credential, or did you still have to work just as hard to get the attention of movie producers and so forth?
I have to work hard at getting the attention. It's something that I'm still working on, and I don't like to promote the princess angle, but I think in doing, I've done a lot of plays in LA, and through that, and then of course work gets work, and so once the ball's rolling, it's easier to find your next project.
So you had 2 movies that came out last year.
Yes.
Very, very different films.
Yeah,
how were those experiences, especially in ways that they differed from the television acting?
So Little Boy it came out last year, but we in fact filmed it about 4 years ago, and it's just that process that takes so long. And that was by far the biggest movie set I've ever been on, and it was so exciting. And we filmed in Mexico, just south of the border, and it has the studios there has such history. It's where they shot Titanic, and so one of the scenes that I was involved with was done on a bench right in front of the ocean with the sun setting. There was a crane shot coming, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is happening. This is amazing. And it was such a wonderful experience. And the time period was 1940s. It was a World War II movie, and so the costumes and the hair was fantastic. And then the other movie, June, which is a horror film, very, very different. And I got to play a teacher in that one, which was fairly amusing, having to conduct a classroom of youngsters and pretend that I know what I'm talking about, trying to teach them photosynthesis until this slightly strange event happens during the class.
Well, do you find as you become better known as an actress that there are more invitations from organizations that seek your input, your philanthropy, and so forth?
Yes, I have found that recently. There is more of an interest, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. But what are your favorite activities in terms of philanthropy? What are the things you personally love to do?
I love working with people in education and children and young adults, because I think it's such an impressionable time to be learning, and I think that education really is the key to tolerance and understanding what's going on in the world. And if the youth are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, it's that they have to know what's going on, and I think it's a good way of creating a safe space for people to have debates about what's going on in the world and what they can do, and then encourage them to do volunteer work, get out in their community, see what else is happening. That, to me, is wonderful, seeing children, or again, young adults, getting involved in that and getting passionate about that.
And so you're not concerned about the young people of today. It seems like every generation goes through this period of angst where they worry about what this generation is going to do, and they worried about it very famously in the case of the World War II generation. And they obviously did well when the challenges presented themselves. But it seems to me that it's a different set of circumstances, but young people are dealing with the same types of problems and challenges, and they do seem to be finding their way. They do seem to identify issues that resonate with them. They do engage in their communities. They engage in their communities in ways that are very different from what young people would have done a generation ago because of technology.
Absolutely.
But it's engagement nonetheless.
Absolutely, and I think it's interesting because I feel like history does repeat itself. And I think that, everyone is going to come across severe struggles in life. And I think ultimately people do overcome it depending on how that presents itself. But the youth of today definitely have a bigger platform than ever before, especially with social media and the likes. I don't necessarily think that sharing a hashtag is going to do anything, but I mean, bringing awareness. They do have, I think, a louder voice than maybe they have in the past. I think only something positive can come out of that. If more people are talking about it, then hopefully it'll create some sort of action and change.
Mm-hmm. So you've obviously accomplished a lot in a short period of time, but when you think about the future, what are the types of goals that you have in mind? Is acting a long-term commitment, and do you have goals within that profession? Do you have goals outside of acting? What's in your mind as far as the next 5 to 10 years?
I definitely will be continuing acting. I don't see myself ever not doing that if I can. It's everything to me. I would love to combine something with acting or the arts and philanthropy somehow. I think there's a lot that can be taught through the arts. I don't know what that might be yet, but it's definitely something I'm going to look into.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Princess Theodora.
Thank you so much.
And thank you. For Global Perspectives, I'm John Bercia. We'll see you next time.